Detective Aiden pulled up his collar against the chilling rain as he stepped out of his car. The gloomy city streets were empty at this hour, stained by flickering neon signs and the occasional passing car. This was the underbelly of the city, where crime festered like an open wound. Aiden was met at the crime scene by his partner, Detective Wells. "Sorry to call you out on a night like this," Wells said, lifting the yellow tape for Aiden to duck under. "What have we got?" Aiden asked gruffly. He had seen it all in his years on the force, but something about tonight left a sinister feeling in his gut. Jane Doe, mid-30s. No ID, no purse or phone. Looks like her throat was slashed. Wells gestured to the woman sprawled on the grimy alley pavement. Aiden crouched down, examining the body. He closed his eyes and steadied his breathing as he prepared to tap into the unique psychic power that had both blessed and cursed him since childhood. By touching the wrist of a deceased person, he could see their final moments through their eyes, witnessing their last breaths as if he was right there with them. It was an ability Aiden kept secret, known only to him. He had learned to harness it over the years to aid in solving crimes, yet it still took a heavy toll each time. As he connected to the victim's spirit, chilling visions would flood his mind, sounds of struggle, twisted faces of killers, the metallic stench of blood pooling beneath their prone body. Aiden would emerge from the visions disoriented and shaken, with a throbbing migraine as his mind slowly returned to the present moment. He hated this morbid invasion into a person's dying thoughts, but it provided clues no other investigator could access. Each time he touched a victim, he braced for the anguished rush of sensations and images, like being pulled into a nightmare, unable to wake until the last echo of life had slipped away. This psychic curse allowed him to deliver justice, yet filled him with a profound loneliness. No one could ever truly understand the horrors he witnessed behind closed eyes. Taking a steadying breath, Aiden placed 2 fingers on the woman's cold wrist. Suddenly, his vision swam, transporting him into the woman's mind as she was murdered. He saw a hulking, shadowy figure approach from behind, grabbing her. She tried to scream, but only gurgled as the knife sliced her throat. Aiden jumped back, breaking the connection. He always hated this part of the job, but it gave him an edge in solving difficult cases. This time, however, he could not make out the killer's face, hidden in darkness. "Did you get anything?" Wells asked jokingly. Aiden shook his head. "Just a shadowy figure with a knife." Wells sighed in disappointment. "I could have told you that." He didn't fully buy into Aiden's ability, rather chalked it up to Aiden's uncanny detective skills. Aiden bid Wells good night and headed home to his lonely apartment. He poured himself a glass of whiskey. It was going to be another restless night. Over the next week, more bodies turned up, each with their throat viciously slashed. The city was gripped with panic as the tally rose to 8 victims. Aiden attended each crime scene, hoping for a break in the case. But each time he was met with the same shadowy figure in the victim's final moments. Other evidence was scarce, with no fingerprints or DNA left behind by the killer. After the latest murder, Aiden conferred again with Wells. "This guy is a phantom," Wells said in frustration. Aiden hesitated. "I'm starting to see inconsistencies between what I glimpse of the killer and the actual evidence at the scenes. It's like he leaves behind a false trail." Wells gave Aiden a sideways glance but didn't push further. "Well, hopefully we catch a real break soon, or this guy will carve up half the city." Back at his desk, Aiden tacked up crime scene photos. The victims seemingly had nothing in common, but there had to be a pattern. He stared at the board, a chill running down his spine. He recognized some of these people from his past. Rita, a bartender he used to chat with after work. Luis, a cigar shop owner who always slipped Aiden a couple free stogies. Dr. Bradford, his old dentist. They couldn't be coincidences. This was personal. Someone was targeting people from his life, sending a twisted message. Aiden renewed his efforts, poring through old case files and informant tips. He had to stop whoever was behind this before the body count rose further. Aiden soon found he could not escape the brutality, even away from the crime scenes. At home, violent visions flashed through his mind at odd hours, jolting him awake. He saw disturbing images, blood spreading across floors, the light fading from wide, terrified eyes. He kept the hallucinations secret, worried that involving Wells or the department shrink would take him off the case. He had to see this through. The next week, the killer's pace quickened. Bodies appeared on consecutive nights now, manufactured into grotesque displays, as if the killer delighted in the city's deepening dread. At the 8th crime scene, a familiar silhouette appeared at the edge of the alleyway. Aiden chased after it, heart thundering. The shadowy figure turned to face him, knife glinting. Then it vanished, leaving Aiden alone with the cold rain pelting his face. He hesitated telling Wells about the encounter. He didn't need any more doubt cast on his mental state while a murderer was still at large. Aiden's apartment became his solitary cell. The walls were plastered with crime scene photos and analysis. His all-consuming focus on the murders resulted in him forgetting to eat or sleep. He continued down his lonely path, not wanting to risk involving anyone else in his dangerous obsession. The killings were affecting him in ways he could not explain. At the next scene, when he touched the body, instead of the victim's last moments, he saw himself as the killer, slitting this woman's throat ear to ear. The vision sickened him, and Aiden vomited then and there, earning a worried look from Wells. But he could not unsee the vision. Shaken, he wondered if he was being pulled into the killer's depraved psyche. He had to hold it together for the sake of the victims depending on him for justice. It all came crashing down 2 nights later. Wells called Aiden to an alley, face grim. As Aiden examined the body of a young man, realization drained the color from his face. He recognized the clothes, knew this body's face like his own. He had never felt like this before. As he had done hundreds of times before, he placed his fingertips on the young man's wrist. Through the victim's eyes, he saw his own rage-contorted face reflected back as he murdered the man. Aiden reeled, backing away. "What's wrong?" Wells asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Aiden couldn't find the words to respond. This couldn't be real. He rushed from the scene, Wells yelling after him. At the precinct, he frantically pulled up surveillance footage from the alleyway. He watched himself on video slitting the man's throat. Watched himself tenderly wipe the knife clean of prints. Suddenly, it all made horrible sense. He was the killer. He didn't know how, but something had invaded his mind, his body. Every murder flashed before his eyes, gory and intimate. It was then when the sound of heavy boots echoed through the station. "Put your hands up!" Wells shouted, gun drawn. Aiden froze. He had no words to defend his innocence, possessed by some malignant force. They hauled Aiden away, into an interrogation room. Wells' eyes shone with anger and betrayal. "Why?" he demanded. "We were partners, friends. Yet you murdered all those innocent people. For what?" Aiden shook his head. "It wasn't me. I mean, it was, but I didn't want to. I swear something is making me." Wells scowled. "Enough bullshit. We got you on camera. Just tell us where the murder weapon is. Maybe the judge shows you mercy." Aiden racked his brain but could not remember what he had done with the knife. He struck the table in frustration. "Please, you have to believe me. I would never do this. Something evil invaded my mind, turned me into a puppet. You know me," he pleaded desperately. Wells hesitated, seeing the genuine anguish in Aiden's eyes. Finally he replied coldly, "I thought I knew you. But you're just another psycho this city churned out." He stormed from the room, leaving Aiden alone in the bleak box. Aiden sat despondently in the frigid interrogation room after Wells had left. He knew no one would believe his claims of being possessed. They all thought he was just another deranged killer. He had to take matters into his own hands. Aiden eyed the lanky patrol officer outside the room through the one-way glass. The man looked bored. casually spinning his baton as he leaned against the wall. Aiden carefully slipped his cuffed hands from behind his back to his front, then waved to get the officer's attention. "Hey, I think my nose is broken," he called out. The patrolman entered, one hand resting on his holstered gun. "Make it quick," he grumbled, leaning down to inspect Aiden's face. In a flash, Aiden twisted the chain connecting his cuffs around the officer's throat, squeezing with all his strength. The man gasped for air, face purpling as he struggled to break free. But Aiden's grip held firm, fueled by desperation. After an agonizing minute, the officer lost consciousness and collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. Aiden's hands shook as he snatched the keyring from the officer's belt and unlocked his cuffs. His career and reputation were already in tatters. What did one more act of violence matter? Peering around, Aiden dragged the unconscious officer into the room and hastily swapped their clothes. His heart pounding, Aiden slipped out into the hallway, trying to adopt the patrolman's bored swagger. At the booking desk, he kept his head low, avoiding eye contact. The clerk waved him by without a second glance. Finally outside, Aiden broke into a sprint. He had no time to waste if he was going to stop the evil force that had turned him into a killer. He slipped into the darkness, a fugitive on a quest for redemption, or vengeance. Now a fugitive, he raced through the shadows towards an abandoned building he knew the city's outcasts squatted in. Whoever, or whatever, was controlling him had to be based there. He burst through the door, gun drawn. "Show yourself," he yelled into the darkness. Laughter echoed from the corners. A voice floated from the shadows. "Dear Aiden, I've been waiting for you." A figure stepped into the moonlight streaming through the windows. Aiden's blood ran cold. It was his own face staring back at him, edged by madness. "We've had so much fun together," the double purred, "but it's time we parted ways." The shadow lunged, knocking the gun away. It felt like wrestling a mirror. Aiden managed to pin his doppelganger down. "What are you?" he gasped. The shadow's eyes turned obsidian. "I am the soul of this city, all the fear, violence, and anger given form. And we fed so well, you and I." Revulsion ripped through Aiden. He had been an unwitting conduit to something monstrous. "No more," he choked out. He aimed his pistol at the monster and pulled the trigger twice. The bullets went through his target as if he wasn't there. Confusion raced through Aiden's mind. Was it real? How could he tell? There was no way to understand what this thing was, but Aiden wasn't interested in continuing to participate in its sick game. With his last ounce of will, he turned his gun